I hear most people who were born and raised in this county will say, I love Macon County. But they don't act like it because their actions speak much louder than their words.
Yes.
And what they do shows disdain and near hatred for the county and the community. Yet they conveniently articulate the words, I love Macon County.
Right.
Now, what am I missing here between what I see as these two extreme interpretations of loving this county and loving these people and taking care of this business?
That's a really deep question, Chief, and it's one that I have pondered for many, many years. I'm going to go out on a limb and say some things that people talk about behind closed doors, but they don't like to talk about out in the open. I think one of let me just back up a minute and preface that by saying, when we talk about love, we have to be very, very particular about defining what that means, because I think a lot of people will give voice to it, but like you say, sometimes love looks differently than it does from the general idea of what we mean when we say love. Sometimes love means holding people accountable. Sometimes love means tough love. Sometimes love means exposing and airing dirty laundry. Sometimes that's what love looks like. And I think that, you know, as a people, I think it's not just here in Macon County, I think Black people as a whole, we are on a journey to learn to love ourselves, but first know ourselves and then love ourselves. Because our history in this country has been one that has taught us to hate ourselves, even though we don't like to say that, but that has been our history. We have been systematically taught how to hate ourselves. I'm reminded right here of the Kenneth Clark study. It's a doll study that Kenneth Clark did back in the 50s that was replicated a couple of years ago by a young sister in New York, where young children were given the choice, young African-American children were given the choice of a doll, one black, one white. And to a number almost, the majority of those children chose the white doll. Well, that's because the images that they see on TV, in print literature, everywhere they see, the European standard of beauty is held up as the standard of beauty. And so it's very subtle how we learn how to hate ourselves. And so because we've been systematically taught to hate ourselves, we've also been systematically taught to hate anybody who looks like us. I'm convinced that that's why our homicide rate is so high, and it seems like it's getting worse. We are almost imploding on ourselves as a people because we have not learned how to truly love ourselves. So to go back to your thing about Macon County, and I'll speak about Tuskegee in particular because that's where I was born and raised. Growing up in Tuskegee in the 50s and 60s and 70s, there was almost, and here goes that little dirty laundry that we don't like to talk about, but there was almost two Tuskegees. And people who are of a certain age will remember it's almost like there was a class caste system that had put in place. E. Franklin Frazier, I think, wrote a book called Black Bourgeoisie a while back, maybe back in the 50s. And so there was this division based on class lines and, yes, color lines and all of those things that the Black community doesn't like to talk about but that exist. And so I think in this community, there are still remnants of that. Who went to school where, you know, who lived in what community. Now it doesn't really make a difference because we all pretty much in the same boat now because those little lines have been so blurred. And the devastation has been so great in this community, we're all pretty much in the same boat, and maybe that's a good thing. But to answer your question, I think a part of what you're asking goes back to that and stems from that. Who was born on what side of the tracks and how they were treated as children, because children's scars linger on and on You know, when a child is made to feel inferior or less than, those scars don't heal easily. And so you have a whole community of adult people who have not done the inner work, I call it, that it takes to heal those wounds and then move on. There's also a saying that says wounded people wound people, or hurting people hurt people. And I think the Black community as a whole, and in Tuskegee's case in particular, since that's what we're talking about, that's what we see. That's why there's not a swing for my grandchildren to swing on when they come to visit in this community. That's why we have allowed ourselves to go into the kind of devastation that we see now.